Okay, here we go. Looks like we had a little glitch there, but otherwise, it seems like everything else is running smoothly. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing not bad. I've had a fun week visiting some film sets and going into the city of Toronto, visiting some film sets and getting getting some interesting little opportunities there, which I'm glad. And we got a little interesting script to discuss tonight. So
Yes,
and,
we
and, and
do.
I'm happy to have you here for that. So
I'm always glad to be here. Good script, bad script, anything in between. I'm glad to be here. So thank you.
oh, well, thank you. I love having you on as a fellow writer. It's always good. We can talk a little bit more intimately on the shop side of things as opposed to just the audience side of things. So we get that extra perspective, which I think is great. So let's see here. It seems like we're
Hope
coming
to
in
be able to
through.
provide it.
Yeah, it seems like coming in through well. So let's get started. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts both professional and amateur, circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, behind the scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week is Adega Outlaw. Glad to have you back again, sir.
Yeah, very good evening.
We are going to be reviewing a contained thriller titled Crush, which came in 34th place on last year's Blacklist. So top 40 script.
I don't understand
Well, it got 13 votes, so 13 producers saw something of interest here. The logline for Crush is as follows: A woman wakes up in a room with no recollection of how she got there. The ceiling descends, which is a very tight log line and
Yeah,
opens up a lot of potential there. So, Adega, please share with us, what is the synopsis for Crush?
it is. Emily, a tough mother, wakes in a locked concrete room, unable to speak. Desperate to reunite with her son Benny, she faces a horrifying dilemma. Choose who dies among strangers and loved ones as the ceiling lowers with each decision. Guided by glowing symbols, her choices test her humanity.
All
There
right,
you go.
so that does detail quite a bit of what this script is about. Um, it did make an interesting choice by essentially taking the character of Emily, who is our main character, and giving her like vocal cord paralysis, where she was able to mouth words, but nobody could really hear what she was saying. So it was relying on a lot of the other characters to do some of the talking for her. And I can see an actor appreciating a juicy role like that, where they have to use their whole body to
Right.
convey what's going on, as instead of just relying on words. And yeah, I thought there were some interesting parts of it. What was your first impressions of Dega as you were reading the script?
Well, that was probably one of the bigger ones is the conundrum where you're seeing her discovery that she can't speak. She still has her phone. She's someplace where she had no idea where she was going to be, and the instant mystery is always it. You want that first few minutes or first few lines of a book or whatever you're reading to be something that really catches you, and I gotta hand it to him. That did.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the setup was almost immediately you kind of know who this person is physically. Um, so that was again it was done pretty well, and then the added part of no voice. Um, in some of the writing I've done, I've ran into different other authors who have various different disabilities, hearing, vision, what have you. And to have somebody with a disability, even if it isn't a disability, but a problem with a situation, I enjoyed that. I thought that's okay. This is pretty cool. It was something that got me within the first few minutes. I'm going to pay close attention to what's going on and try and figure out why she can't speak, whether it be a disability or someone has done something to her. For the first couple of pages, I was assuming it was something surgical that was done to her.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I also liked how they quickly established a ticking clock of sorts with these 8 small red lights that are above the door in her room.
Right.
And the other part too, which I found was interesting, is the door itself is not flush with the ground. There's actually a sizable gap underneath that you can fit your hand and arm through. Only so far before it, starts chewing away at the skin underneath. Um, and then what's also interesting is the main character is described as tough looking and muscular,
Hmm.
and kind of like a scrappy, someone who has no problem getting into a scrap fight of sorts. And I was thinking, okay, so we want to show that this character, even though she's a woman, she does have a little bit more of a physical presence compared to other characters. And as we see other characters pop up, they are far more frail than Emily. Um, but yeah,
But
we
it's also something that's going to help with the plot later on too.
a little bit, yeah, because it's not MCU levels, which is quite happy to experience.
Yes.
Um, but I do like how the writer establishes that she can't speak. So instead of giving her proper dialogue box, they use her lines as italics, and they're left justified to the page. And he uses the scene descriptions, to help kind of further that immersion. And I thought it kind of worked pretty well. And so we have this very eerie setting of like these white concrete walls all around her, and on the floor before her are 3 Roman numerals: 1, 2, and 3.
Mhm.
And and then as she's kind of wandering around and she realizes, oh, she still has her phone on her, she checks her phone, and she sees her text, and she's doing a text with someone named David, who's she says she's visiting her mother, and then she's going to the shopping and asks if David needs anything. He says nope, so we can assume that David is some sort of maybe boyfriend or relative to her, but she has no signal. See, she can't call out or do anything, so it's really frustrating for her. And
I got a
as
quick
she's
question for you.
yeah, yeah,
It's not really related to what you're saying, so I'm sorry to interrupt,
that's okay.
but I can't let this go because I've done I don't know how many scripts with you so far, but this is the first time I've noticed in the script there's actual diagrams where you see the pattern of lights, you see the Roman numerals that are printed out on the
Hmm.
page. My thing is because I thought it was unusual, but really good for the script. Is that common?
It's not common because for decades you couldn't actually do that into a script. Um, I mean, up until more recent versions of Final Draft, if you wanted to insert images into your screenplay, you had to have like a PDF editor. And not like the simple ones that you can get from like Adobe, but like some really high priced ones that can allow you to actually change everything on the page, and then have it reformat for you.
Hmm.
And this was usually done just because, as executives get stupider, you as a writer have to work harder to kind of make them see the vision you're trying to provide.
Right.
And this writer, I think he used it very carefully and sparingly. Um,
Yes.
so like the 8 lights, it's a standard template, and it doesn't take up much of the page. Like not even I'd be surprised if it takes up more than like 3 lines, really.
It's one line, 2 lines. Yeah, well, the Roman numerals took up a few lines, but the
Yeah,
actual lights maybe 2 lines. But the first time I saw them, I thought there are 4 lights. I went to
yeah,
Star
Star Trek.
Trek, but it I as a gimmick, I thought, well, this is pretty sharp. Maybe that will draw somebody's attention who's reading the script. And I hadn't seen it before, and that's why I wanted to ask you about it.
No, it's relatively new, and as long as it's done kind of sparingly, it's usually pretty fine. Because again, the whole idea to showcase yourself as a writer is how well can you convey your ideas in words that everyone reading it kind of hits very close to the same interpretation.
Hmm.
Um, Now, as I was reading the script, aside from the Roman numerals, I don't even think he needed the image of the red lights, but it does create a little bit of power, um,
Hmm.
behind it, because you're associating that particular image into the visuals that you're generating from how it's described in the script. And fortunately, this writer, Michael Jones, was very smart in making certain that the setting is as plain and easy to comprehend as possible. It's a white concrete room with 14 feet high ceilings, and it's very simple to picture. Anyone picturing it is going to see pretty much the same thing in their head, with maybe slight variations.
That is one thing. I think, at least for my limited knowledge of how set design and expenses go, to me, the whole thing looks like it would be a fairly inexpensive film to make.
Yeah, like think of that scene in Next Generation where Picard, he gets his artificial heart injured, and he's in that white void with Q.
Yep.
Pretty much like that, except maybe you can see some corners. But you get this sense that that's kind of like the space that Emily is in, and as she's starting to like process the limited information around her, and she has her text, the entire room has a low hum, and then a vibration, and then 3 of the walls around her, basically the ones that are opposite the door, the walls become transparent and essentially glass. And on each side of each wall is a new character. First one is named Vincent, and he's 80 years old, and he's just sitting in the corner. He looks like he's been exhausted, and he's been here for a while. We then have Lucy, who's 40, and she's, trying to get out, banging on her own door. And then we have Earl, who paces alone, and he's like in his 30s, and he's just pacing alone. He sees Emily in, starts banging on the glass trying to find out what's going on. And so we get this dialogue between these 3 characters who learn that Emily is mute for reasons that even she doesn't know. And I would say like the conversation here is very like, it's very Saw or Cube or any type of those contained thrillers where each character is asking a question that is motivated on this with the same motivations. Why are they here? How can they get out? And
right. And then that's when they did notice that her room was different as well.
Exactly. They noticed her room is different because there's the 8 lights above the door, and they can see on her floor that she's got 3 Roman numerals there, and they don't have any of that. So that causes some anxiety with the characters, and I thought that was really well conveyed. And until the 3 Roman numerals on the ground glow, and they hum for a few moments, and then they stop flashing or stop being illuminated, and then we hear light scratching from above, and the ceiling in Emily's room drops 2 feet and then just sits at 12 feet high. And everybody around Emily starts freaking out. And I thought, okay, this is not bad suspense going on here. The logline does give a great deal of it away, but how this is all set up and the way it's sort of delivered, I thought, okay, this is not bad. They're giving us, a chance. And what's interesting is that the ceiling descends 2 feet at a time, so you have 7 moments before that ceiling comes and meets the ground.
Right.
So lots of opportunities for increasing the tension, which I thought was actually pretty good.
Another thing I thought was pretty decent, and the more I think about it, was probably pretty well, is you only truly need one character to develop in this whole story.
Right.
You may have a bunch of characters, but there is only one whose character and personality needs to actually be developed. Everyone else you can just brush lightly, because they are incidental, and not necessarily because they're going to live or going to die, but it's not really key to progressing the story. And so I thought that was, you keep things simple, not a bad idea.
Yeah, well, the thing that I found was kind of clever is each character, like Lucy, Earl, and Vincent, the old man, they each get a moment that actually defines them before Emily figures out that she has to make a choice. And that's something that really has horrified her, because as the lights, illuminate again, and she doesn't step over one of the three Roman numerals, the ceiling then descends another 2 feet. And
And was it Vincent, the old guy? He was the one who figured it out.
yeah,
He said, "You know what? I'm old. This is what's happening. Don't worry about me. You guys are young. You need to live a life." And so everyone pretty much got the clue off of him. And who knows? You said he was the way you described him. Maybe he had seen this before and didn't say anything. He just said that, that's what these numbers are for. You got to choose, because he was sitting there. And again, being 80 years old, you could get exhausted pretty easily. But he was a smart guy and said, "You know what? I'll be the sacrifice."
yeah. He was the first one to figure it out, because as they're trying to figure out like what the Roman numerals are, Vincent points to his door, and you can kind of make out that there's a big Roman numeral 1 there. And then as he points to the other people's doors, he sees 2 and 3. And Earl and
Right.
Lucy look at theirs, and they're all freaked out. And then that's where everything gets put into place. And then, of course, Lucy is trying to figure out what's going on. And Earl, he's kind of foolish, and he's like, maybe we signed up for a reality TV show and forgot about it. and and the other part too is like, I'm trying to figure out a way to delicately say this, but it was really tricky um to see how Emily makes her first decision, and she doesn't quite know what's going to happen. I mean, there's a little bit of like peril, but it's still ambiguous enough. And
Right.
so Emily is trying.
And none of them had seen anybody die, so she didn't know that that's exactly what was going to happen. It's just that she had to make a choice.
Yeah, so she has to make a choice, and so she decides to step onto the 2 Roman numerals, which is Earl's room, and everyone kind of waits anxiously, and then the other 2 symbols just disappear, and number 2 turns red, and then all of a sudden Emily's ceiling rises back up to 14 feet, and then Earl's ceiling starts to slowly descend 12 feet, 11
That's
feet,
right. He went first,
10
didn't he?
feet.
Yeah, I got. Yep.
And Earl is freaking out, obviously, and he's trying to open the door. He's slamming on it. He's screaming for help. He wants someone to do something. Emily has already stepped off the numbers, and that doesn't change everything. Everything is kind of going closer and closer. And I mean, I'm just thinking of like an actor would absolutely love this role, because you get to really kind of shine in your panic and fear as this ceiling comes closing in on you. 6 feet, 5 feet, 4 feet, 3 feet, pushing his back and forcing him to the floor, pinned between the ground and the ceiling. And then everybody watching in horror as his skull gets crushed, and his eyes get popped out of their socket before they get crushed, and everything just kind of turns into a bloody mess. And then after a beat, the ceiling rises, and you got the blood stain on the ceiling, and then again on the floor. And
Yeah.
everybody
The
is like,
goo that was left.
everybody is trying to like keep their food down, but clearly can't. And then instead of lingering on the horror, all 3 walls turn back into concrete, and Emily is left all alone again. And all of a sudden, the lights above her door, instead of them being 8 red, it's 1 yellow and 7 red. And that conveys a lot of information to us as, oh, she's going to have to go through this 7 more times. Now,
Yes.
what was your thoughts about? So after the light changes, after the walls kind of go back up, something happens. Something gets put into Emily's room.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what was your thoughts on that choice?
Reward, here's your chocolate bar.
Yeah.
You know what? At this point, I was thinking, and to be honest with you, I started analyzing more of a scientific thing. How do the walls go from concrete to glass?
Hmm.
Why is it a chocolate bar? Why is there a space in between the doors? So I got distracted on all the things I thought could have been a done. Um, I guess either more obvious that this is this type of facility or it's another type of facility. I don't want to get into it because um, I thought ended up being very confusing. And when I say this type of facility, I'm thinking, is it high tech or low tech? Is
Hmm.
it something that we can do, or is it something that somebody with an awful political and scientific influence can do, or if it's even beyond that? Um, but sliding the chocolate bar was a little odd. Uh, I I guess it's, here's you played the keyboard, chicken. Here's your corn. Um,
Yeah, it reminded me of like the experiment with mice. Solve a puzzle, get a slice of cheese.
right, right, exactly. So it kind of made sense, but again, like I was thinking, it was just uh, like she's works out, and why would they send her a chocolate bar? Whoever has her held knows that this person is, physically different.
Doesn't seem to be the
And
one type that eats candy. Yeah.
right, right, yeah, yeah. I would think maybe water, maybe a new, access to the phone for a second,
Hmm.
some other type of thing. So it was puzzling more than anything. It started to draw me out of the story. The chocolate bar, to be honest with you, that was the other big thing that right off the jump started to draw me out of the story was the gap between the door
Yeah.
and the floor.
Yeah, it
But
felt weird.
mhm. uh, we get later on where she tries to use her phone
Hmm.
and it ends up on the other side of the door. And I know I'm jumping a little bit,
No, you're
and
actually right
then
in time. Like she's so frustrated, she ends up throwing the phone.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it wasn't working. It went underneath the door, and then she realized, oh, this is a mistake, and trying to get it back. And then she reaches with her fingers, and I can understand the struggle uh, to the point where she started to cause her hand to tear from the door.
Hmm.
And for me, things situations like that seem to be more frustrating than story helping. I don't know why. It just seems like to me, there would be more of a logical way to get it. And eventually, she did with back. Um, but who if she had a phone, who's going to throw their phone? Even in a dramatic situation like that. And
Yeah.
again, I'm struggling for words, but it was quite frustrating because I think most people put in high stressful situations are going to do something stupid. They're going to react very oddly, but that one I don't see. And then it got her down on the floor to where she was looking under the door, and I could see that it was there that I realized, okay, here's our plot device. You're seeing an empty hall. Somewhere down the line, we're going to know what's in that hall. It was
Right.
a setup for that. And I can kind of understand that, but for me, I think there would have been better ways. Like, I don't know, just the gap under the door just seems, it's not quite cliche, but if I had a better word, it was tiring to my intellect. Sorry.
No. I think it was a little bit convoluted because the act of her throwing the phone, where it slides underneath the door, and then her getting the phone back with her headphones, um, it didn't have much of a cause and effect. It didn't have any relevance to the rest of the plot. All it did was establish that there's some darkness beyond the door, which you'd already assume is there. So
Right. Right.
so it didn't. It really just kind of ate up time, which is weird because this is only an 85-page script, so you don't really need to pad anything out for it.
Right. There's no story to this script, to be honest. It's
It's a series of
mostly
challenges.
situational.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's to draw out an emotion or emotions that will match certain aspects of humanity. And it's done situationally instead of conversationally or, with a heavy plot. It's just so yeah, it did fill things. I guess if it was struggling like that without, you know, spending the time to analyze why in the heck would they do that, or what is this in here? But you saw someone struggling. Maybe it was a hope that it would add tension to the story. Is she going to get it? Can she do it? Oh, now it's starting to turn her hand red. Oh, wait, now she's starting to bleed because of the effort.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, I could see, well, maybe it meant to add some tension, but ceiling dropping every, 20 minutes or what have you, as soon as they clean up the room and put somebody else in there.
Which is what they. I mean, the thing is, if they, if she threw her phone out and all of a sudden that triggered the ceilings to start bringing down, and she realized she had to get her phone back in order for it to stop because there's no other option. It was the only cause she did and the only effect that she's dealing with. That would have been good and intense because it would tell like whoever's controlling this doesn't want her to lose that phone for whatever reason, and would it come back into play at a later point. Now, minor spoiler: the phone never comes back into play.
Right.
I mean, it's not in any manner that she hasn't already used it before, and so it's kind of like I mean, I think the writer was trying to convey that. Because she doesn't have a voice, she can use the phone to kind of communicate to other people by like writing the stuff on a text message and then showing it through the glass, which is what she ends up doing. But it really, we don't always see what she's writing, and we're seeing mostly the reactions of what the other actors are doing or other characters are doing, and the other characters are doing a lot of the heavy lifting on exposition by way of questions and reactions to those questions. So yeah, the whole scene of her throwing it and then getting it back felt.
Oh, but that was brilliant.
If
it would have added 3 times the tension if the ceiling started to move because that phone was now outside the door.
Yeah.
And of course, they used this is Script and I both caught this, and I'm sure if you guys had read it, you would understand where we're coming from. But the use of instead of the light on the phone, they used a torch.
Yeah.
So you knew it was an English author, but she was using that to try and see down the hallway. So there's little teeny bits where, the phone's still there, but that bit of tension to rip your hand open just for a phone without a lot of other stresses involved didn't make sense to me. But if, like you said, it would have been many-fold better if that ceiling started to move until she got that phone back.
Mm-hmm. That's my thought. But when she finally does get the phone back, the walls go back to clear again, and we find out that Earl's room has been scrubbed clean, and Matt appears, and Matt is this 20-year-old guy who's he does a lot of drugs and experimentation, and
he's kind of sharp though.
Yeah, but he is a clever guy, and he's pretty forthright with everybody around him. And sadly, Lucy and Vincent know what's going on, as does Emily, and Matt's trying to figure out what is, catch up, so to speak. And of course, when Lucy refers to this entire situation as a game, Matt, is perplexed by that until the flashing on the floor stops, and then the ceiling starts to descend 12 feet in Emily's room. And of course, Lucy's first reaction is just step on his symbol pointing to Matt. and yeah, so and Emily looks at Lucy, and Lucy's asks her the question, you have kids, and Emily can only do just nod, and Lucy says, yeah, I have a 1-year-old son, his name is Lucas, and Emily tears up, and she's getting emotional connection here, and Lucy is saying how much she'd like to see her son again, and Matt is just confused, and he's like, I have no idea.
I'm young. I could have kids.
Yeah, but he's I have no idea what you're talking about, but sounds like someone is going to die, right? and Matt realizes that Emily is the one that has to pick the person, and of course Lucy is kind of glaring at Matt, and Matt's like, okay, great, Lucy, you got kids, congrats. Like billions of other people, I don't have kids, all right, but I can't help that right now. I'm still young. I was a kid not that long ago. And then Vincent chimes in. He says, I'll go. He's like, it's fine for me. I've never had kids. My wife died 20 years ago. I live alone. Um, and Vincent's like, don't make a fuss over an old man like. Well, he says old bugger like me, so that's more, British
Yep.
lexicon there. And so Emily steps onto Vincent's door, the number one Roman numeral, and Vincent just takes it like a champ. He just kind of lies there and says, don't feel bad about this, and I hope you see your son again, and tells Vincent to get off the drugs.
Right.
And then everybody kind of turns away. Matt freaks out because he is having trouble comprehending what's happening in front of him. And then, of the 7 remaining red lights, one more turns yellow, and another chocolate bar is slid into the room from underneath the door. And Emily is so frustrated, she just smashes the bar against the door, and then starts cursing at them, but not able to actually say anything. So he's just mouthing like F-bombs and stuff and banging on the door. And yeah, really, really upset. And so yeah, she's kind of defeated again. And then she hears the ringtone for her phone, and then she of course grabs it, but of course there's no signal, there's nothing there. The ringtone is actually just an alarm that reminds her to pick up her son Benny from school. And
Right.
She feels really defeated again because she doesn't know where her kid is. She doesn't know if she'll ever see her kid again. And before she can even comprehend that, the walls become transparent, and Vincent's room has been replaced with another person named Sarah, who's 50, and she has no idea what's going on. and now we get into this nice little dialogue between Matt and Lucy and this new woman Sarah, who's basically trying to figure out, like, well, why is this girl, who we have no idea who she is or what her name is, and she can't speak, why does she get to choose who lives or dies?
Right.
And this gets into a nice little kind of debate where Emily is just completely lost, like, and helpless. And I think this goes to the clever writing for keeping her mute, because now everybody has got to, essentially ask simple questions that Emily can respond to. And of course, when the lights start going up again, they're everybody else is rightfully panicking because who's going to be next? And when Lucy's trying to figure out, like, well, how many times has this been done? Emily just kind of raises her fingers twice, and Matt and Lucy kind of put together that, oh, okay, so yep, the lights indicate how many more times are doing this, and Matt finds it's completely morbid that she's done it twice and she has to do it like 6 more times. And as the symbols light up and Emily doesn't move, Matt's just desperately saying, like, you've got time, you don't have to talk, we don't have to decide yet, let's figure this out on our own. And Sarah, just trying to be this polite new character who has no clue what's going on, just like Matt did a few moments ago,
Right.
is asking the same questions, like, can someone explain what's happening here? And what kind of made me not get tired of this type of repeated question, which is going to come up 6 more times, is the fact that there's other conversations happening around that new character that's further developing what's going on with the story.
Right. And each one has a unique set of circumstances. So, and again, we don't have to get too far into individuals the way the story's written, but just that, they're different walks of life, and they all pretty much can communicate, except for one later on down the line. So yeah, I'm trying to remember, who goes next? It's been a few days since I read this.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So basically what happens here is, like, Lucy wants to get rid of Matt. Matt doesn't want to go. Sarah is
Yep, I'm
confused.
right. This is exactly what I was thinking. This is where Matt figures out Lucy.
Yes, this is where Lucy slips up and says that she just wants to see her daughter, And Matt's like, wait a
Yep.
minute, you said you had a son. And she's like, well, I also have a daughter. Right. What's your son's name? And she's like, I'm not going to tell you. He's like, you already told us. Just tell us what it is again.
He
And
got her.
and then she basically says, my son's name is Lewis. And Matt's like, you're lying. You said his name was Lucas. And Emily agrees. And we find out that Lucy, yeah, she doesn't have any kids, but she has money. And Emily just steps on her thing, her number, and then Lucy starts cursing her name or cursing her out as she gets crushed. And we find out that Matt, he has a mom who's suffering from cancer, and we don't know if that's real or not. So we're left to figure that out. And poor Sarah is getting horrified at seeing this woman next to her get pancaked, essentially. And
No, it was pretty good. I like Matt. It's too bad. Well, I don't want to get ahead of the game, but it was nice to see a liar get called out. Now,
yeah,
it's kind of harsh for lying to be squished, but it made Emily's decision a heck of a lot easier.
pretty much. Yeah, I mean, the Lucy was clearly a self-serving character, and would say anything to stay alive, as a lot of people probably would at this point. And Matt, this thought is still messed up, and even as Lucy is being crushed, Matt's telling Sarah, like, don't look, just turn your head away, just don't stare at it. And Sarah can't help but look, and she begins to cry and scream like horror, scream loudly as she watches Lucy go from a three-dimensional character to a one-dimensional character, essentially.
Right. And I do like that I kind of satisfied in a morbid sort of way when it talks about the skull popping on these people. And I'm going,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I can kind of get into that.
Yep.
I'm not usually a horror person, but knowing the human anatomy is,
Yeah.
sorry, a little sickening of me.
Little sick, but it shows that there's a little bit of research done by the writer there.
Right.
So another chocolate bar is slid into the room. 3 yellow lights, 5 red lights, and Emily reads the chocolate bar, looking for anything on it other than the fact that it says it contains peanuts. And yeah,
This is where she decides to eat it, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it is.
well, she ends up going through her phone's photos. Like, she hasn't eaten the chocolate bar, but she goes through the phone's photos of her son and then of her husband, Dave. And then she gets a low battery notification. And then
Oh, yeah.
the symbols glow again. And then in Lucy's room is this 50-year-old guy named Ryan, who he himself can't speak either. But we find out that he's actually deaf and he can only do sign language. And Sarah actually has a deaf child and she can do sign language. So she understands what Ryan is able to say. And I thought this was a clever moment because Ryan reveals that he wasn't fully drugged up when he was taken.
Right.
Like, he woke up somewhere in this hallway, and he describes to Sarah, who's translating, like, it was a long hallway. There's lots of other people that looked heavily sedated in wheelchairs, and he was being wheeled around everywhere. And he got wheeled into this room and dropped off. And and he's got more information, and Sarah's doing her best to kind of like translate this as it goes. And of course, the ceiling starts to descend again, and Emily has to make a choice. It's like, well, is it Matt or Sarah or Ryan that's going to go? Well, Ryan knows a little bit more of what's going on, so we need to find out what he knows. Sarah's the only one that can translate for him. And Matt is essentially useless at this point. And it's this really horrifying decision, especially when Matt realizes that they're giving Emily chocolate. and he's like, this is like weird. Like, when an animal does a trick, it's horrifying. And of course, Matt is trying to argue, well, maybe he will remember something. Because you never know.
Yeah. He did do that. He said, "Yeah, there's got to be something in there. I'll remember something." he trying to beg him for his life, but
Well, it's not even like begging for his life. He's trying to also say like I'm there to encourage you to help you through this because this is a horrible thing. And Emily just says
see,
sorry.
maybe I read that too quick because I didn't pick that up. I thought he was just trying to rationalize to stay alive.
Well, he first started that by saying I might remember some as well, and then he shrugs like you never know, and he says I'm sorry. He's like what why are you? And then of course when he realizes that that Emily's gonna choose his number, he's like I said I've got you. I'm here to support you. I know it's terrible, but I'm trying to keep your head up, and she just mouths sorry, and she has to, and then of course when he's trying to, he's desperately saying, "Please, my mom, I want to see my mom again," and don't, and Matt just says, "Make it stop." He doesn't curse out Emily or anything. He just says, "Make it stop," and everybody turns away, and yep, Matt's gone.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's
See, I think I would have to reread that because you probably got it right. I just got a different impression out of it than that.
oh no,
I
that's
thought
okay.
he was a little more um, trying to negotiate with information that he didn't have. He was actually playing a lie, but that I must have got that wrong. But either way, yeah, Matt's gone. I liked Matt. Too bad.
Yeah, I mean, he was an interesting character in a short time, but this is the point where Emily gets frustrated. She ends up chewing down the candy bar, and we realize, oh, she's allergic to peanuts because she goes into anaphylactic shock, and then her vision blurs, and it cuts to black, and then she ends up waking up inside a hospital room,
Hmm.
and she's handcuffed to the bed, and a nurse wearing a face mask comes in and tries to feed her soup, which she refuses.
Right.
Um,
She takes the water first, but eventually uses the soup
eventually,
to.
well, she uses the soup to try and get the nurse to come closer because she sees a
Mhm.
key hanging around the nurse's neck, and she is hoping that key unlocks the handcuffs. And what's funny is how she refuses to eat the soup just like a child, a stubborn child. Like the nurse is putting the spoon of soup by her lips, and it's just kind of going down her chin and her neck, and then she's trying to shove the spoon inside her mouth to get it in there, and it's just not working until she presents the water, and then she takes a sip, and then for the soup she kind of leans her head forward, then back to try and get the whole body of the nurse coming in. And then this is something that was kind of weird is as soon as the nurse gets close enough, Emily latches onto her neck like a dog.
Yeah. Well, I kind of interpret that as it's almost twofold. One, she's getting a hold of the key
Hmm.
so that she can see if it works for the handcuffs. But the other thing is it was a distraction where the lady thinks she's just getting bit, not realizing she's being clept, that the key is going to be taken from her. But there was an interesting description. Now you have to help me with this one too.
Sure.
Is when the mask came off during this little scruff up, and her lips were sewed together, and she didn't have a nose. If I understood that right,
That's what I read too, yeah.
which again for the end premise really threw me off. It's at this point in the story with again I think of technology, circumstances, different things, and I start going X-Files where this has to be some sort of either a very demented hospital type thing, or there is some sort of alien influence, and stitching someone up and forcing them to feed people and be a nurse. Why would she into my head? And maybe I just overthink it.
Hmm.
Um, but she was successful. She chased the nurse off without her mask and with a nice bite mark on her neck, and she had the and was able to manipulate it free from the bed.
Yeah, and then she finds a key card on the nurse to let her out of the bed, and then ends up going into the hallway just as what what Ryan described. Just this massive hallway with doors lining the walls,
Yes.
and some areas are pure darkness, and other parts have fluorescent lights. She ends up opening one door that is nothing but darkness, but a tiny red light at the very end. So she's in this black void. And I was picturing it in two variations. One variation is where we barely see her, and she's just kind of walking through the void. And the other variation is that we see her fully, like she's properly lit, but everything else around her is just absolutely dark, except for this one little red dot,
Right.
in the
In my
the
mind,
distance.
cop the first one of view, where everything's dark, including she's just struggling to the light.
And yeah, when she ends up getting to that light, she realizes, oh, that's a card reader, and she ends up using it to open the door. And then all she hears are voices that say like, "Hello" and "Help me, please, please." There's someone there, and we kind of get the sense that she's in this big facility, and when she goes into this room that's got the red light to it, it's a camera room, and there's hundreds of these tiny screens on the wall that are observing people in the same room.
All the rooms. Yep.
And
Her situation isn't the only one. There was many setups exactly the same.
suddenly her room turns red, and then she has to quickly hide because two more masked people kind of enter in. They look around for her, they don't see her, they leave. She exits the room as well, going down the hallway, scanning her card into whatever door opens up, and then she ends up getting into this chamber room, which is really weird because it's like it's an immense space. It's got faint green lights flickering from these large pods that are like I'm thinking something like out of the Matrix here.
Yeah, that's exactly where I went to. Either the Matrix. I can't remember another one. Almost like the alien thing. They're life pods.
Yeah, cocoon shaped with green liquid inside, and there's these fully clothed human bodies with their eyes closed, peacefully asleep, just kind of in hibernation of sorts. And these pods stretch for what seems like miles. She sees she hears a creak, and she of course ducks away. Another masked person kind of enters in. They're wearing like hospital scrubs and a mask, and as they're walking through the pods, Emily kind of stays low and listens to see when this person passes her, and then ambushes them, gets her arms around the neck and puts them into a sleeper hold. And even though the person is struggling, Emily and her muscles hold firm, and she's essentially like forced that person into unconsciousness just by oxygen
Right.
deprivation, and then quickly puts on his medical gown and mask and hat, and starts navigating through the hallways, in the skins of the dragon, so to speak, to bring an old story trope into this script. And
Right.
and I thought this was not bad. It's a logical move. It makes sense. It's not outside of the realms of possibility, given the description of Emily and what she's kind of gone through so far, and how she attacked this person. It wasn't like a Black Widow thing or a Batwoman thing. It was nope, just
Oh,
get
it's just
behind him.
surprise and grip.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
get behind them and hold tight. and it's basically like, who can last longer? Can she squeeze that throat closed so that air can't pass through, or can the guy that she's strangling find a way to throw her off or put her up against a wall to try and loosen her up? And it didn't work out well for him, and he was passed out. And as she's sort of making her way through a bunch of all these other people dressed in these gowns and masks, one person stops her and asks for her name. And this one raised another question for me, because we've already seen one person have their mouth stitched shut. So
Right.
wouldn't you think it would be plausible that other people like her would have their mouths also sewn shut?
Well,
So
it could be that, and that was my first thought, but it also could be there a hierarchy within the group.
right.
So some of them would be, some of them may not be. She just ran into the wrong one.
Or she's
Um,
wearing the clothes of a different hierarchy that would suggest
Right.
that they'd have a voice as opposed to the nurse. Because sadly, the script does not distinguish the two gowns if they're
Right.
different. So we're assuming everybody's wearing the same thing, But I'm still thinking like, well, if he says name and she can't talk, wouldn't they just assume she's one of the people that was like the nurse that tried to feed her earlier with a sewn mouth and couldn't say anything? So couldn't she pass as that? But apparently not. And then, so what
Well, I
ends?
could also flash the card that she had, the door reader. But
Yeah,
there's options.
there was other options to explore because I want to see the challenging. I want to see if she had the wits to kind of push it further, and then have this person that's asked her name to really kind of give her the third degree so that you make things more difficult. But the writer just kind of skipped that beat and immediately just had her turn around and just start running away. And now everybody in the hall is
Right.
just chasing after her.
Right.
And and I want to throw it to you, Adiga. So like, as she's being chased down this hall, where does she find herself ending up?
In front of a window.
And what's outside that window?
Now this one is kind of she sees Earth. It's a sly description of Earth, but it went really quick. So you could say, okay, we are on a place where we're pretty much helpless, and I'm not going to get away. So yeah, somewhere we don't know the distance orbit or if it further out away, but she was basically somewhere else.
Yep, out in space. She gets surrounded by the people in medical scrubs. They stab her in the neck with a needle, and she wakes up back in the room she was in at the start of the script. And Ryan and Sarah are still there, and of course she's desperate to try and basically just desperate to
Okay,
try and do something to get out.
can I?
Yeah.
Here's where things started to really bugger for me, and I'm not going to tell you how to end. If you guys have read the script and you know what the end part is, then you'll understand why I'm so completely frustrated with this script. A needle in this situation,
Mm-hmm.
even if it was whoever it was in space, wouldn't you think that they would have some type of device besides a needle, a gas, a magnetic impulse, something besides a needle, something as primitive as that? Uh, all these different really primitive things that were happening, and yet it it's supposed to be quite sophisticated to a point where it's in my book completely it throws me completely out of the story because it was supposed to be so sophisticated and so far ahead, and yet they're using such basic little tools. Uh, it stretched me too far. But that needle was the last. It was like,
That was the
okay, I'm
last one.
done.
I was wondering
That
if,
was it.
because I was wondering now that we understand that this is we're on a spacecraft with people that are most likely not human but look human. I was wondering if this was some sort of Star Trek's version of Prime Directive
Right.
thing, whereas like the reason why she's handcuffed to a hospital bed as opposed to having like more advanced restraints. The clothing being worn by the people that have captured her. The even when she goes into the camera room, it's a basic just set of view screens. Not really crazy. The only time we get to the crazy sci-fi stuff is when she goes into the pod room, and
Right.
I was wondering like, well, could this be what like a Prime Directive thing? Don't show them any type of our technology. But here's the point where I'm on more on your side, is because we find out that these people have the ability to erase memory.
Hmm.
So it doesn't
And they
really,
took her voice without surgery.
yeah.
They're able to monitor the room without, and yet there's cameras in the other showed on the TV screen on screens.
Hmm.
Uh, it just it's such a mix mesh, and even if she was, well, I can't give away the end, but she wasn't supposed to escape,
Right.
and the fact that she did seeing all like a key card, it just none of it fit for me. It threw me completely out. I was done at that point.
No, I mean I can understand that. I just think maybe there is I think whatever the writer was doing in this sense, trying to introduce the sci-fi, the more sci-fi element of it, outside of just keeping it strictly horror and mysterious. I think when they get to the opportunity where an explanation could be had, they falter significantly there.
Right. See, I keep thinking of, there was the 80s movie Phantasm.
Yeah.
And they did that really well, where it was something that was scientifically well beyond, sneak little things in, and played on what the humans are at the time. This one I didn't think he did.
Yeah, maybe Michael Jones to go watch Phantasm and get some inspiration to reconcile that on a rewrite. This is what, now when we get back to the room, I was quite surprised to see that Ryan and Sarah are still there, and they have not introduced who's in the room that Matt was in yet. And that made me wonder, well, whatever situation they're doing here, there is something specific with regards to Emily as to why she's in this room. And it might be, I mean, as morbid as it is, there might be some other motive going on here, because if she would be thrown back in the same room, you'd expect either very different people in the other boxes, in the other cages, as it were, because you'd think, well, someone else would be put into her room to make decisions for the other two people. But apparently that's not the case. So that made me scratch my head a little bit, because I'm wondering, okay, what is the writer telegraphing here? Because we don't really know how long Emily has been unconscious, and we can assume that she's been maybe wandering the halls for, I would say, an hour, perhaps, at most. Mm-hmm. But in that entire time, nothing has changed in that set of rooms that she was attached to earlier. That's very peculiar. That's piqued my curiosity a little bit, because we already know that when she went into the camera room, there are thousands of these other situations with other people inside. So this experiment, or whatever it is ongoing. So why would they halt this one section for her unless there was something important about her that was on their radar? And me, not just as a writer, but as just a general individual, I would, if I were to be in that situation, then pulled out, and then I'd come back and the same people are there, I would realize, so they paused this entire game, as it were, because I was absent as a player. And if it's all predicated on me, then my only choice in order to end this as quickly as possible is to no longer play. That would be my situation. That'd be my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And
no, I completely agree.
And that doesn't dawn on Emily at all. She doesn't even ask, like, why they're still here or anything. Nobody else came in after me. Did you see who took me? Anything? Did the walls go up? Like, Emily can't ask those questions. But even when she's in there and she sees those two faces, she doesn't react if anything is different. She's just upset that she's back in the room. And then all of a sudden the wall becomes clear, and Max is no longer there, but this 65-year-old woman named Ruby is there, and she knows who Emily is. And
it's Mom.
It's Mom. And Sarah and Ryan are surprised by that, and of course now Sarah and Ryan realize, well, one of them is going to be gone because clearly Emily's not going to pick her mother to be crushed next. And now, because Ruby is connected to Emily, we now start getting some more information where Ruby's like, I need to know what happened. Have you done what have you done? Where are David? Where are Benny? Her eyes. Emily rapidly starts typing on her phone a long little message, and then shows it to Ruby, who just cannot comprehend the fact that they're not on Earth anymore, that they're in some sort of ship or something outside of in space. and she saw a whole bunch. Like now, Ruby is telling Sarah and Ryan that what Emily saw, human bodies in these pods, and she tried to escape, but she couldn't escape because she saw that we're in space. And of course now Sarah's like, well, what can we do? How do we get out of here? I mean, it's an awful thing for you to be in this situation because we know you're not going to pick your mother. So, and then Sarah does the one thing that I thought was kind of endearing, which she says, I'm not going to try and convince you of what to do. That just wouldn't be fair. I'm just going to be quiet now and sit over here. Right. And I was like, well, that's a really effective way to make us really like Sarah.
Yeah.
And
she good people.
She was good people, and then when Ruby realizes that Emily is the one that has to pick one of these people, she's, justifiably horrified by that.
Yeah, not just that she sees the lights and notices, oh wait, you've done this a few times.
Yeah.
So
and
the stress level's got to be through the roof.
And then the other one, and then Ruby, as a good mother, is saying, okay, well, whatever decision you make, everyone understands because this is not great. And of course, Sarah says it's okay. Ryan starts signing to Sarah, and that's where he comes up with the ideas like, we're going to do rock, paper, scissors. and
right.
And it's like, well, what else is there a way to do it? To kind of have best of three, figure it out how it goes. And basically,
yeah, and it helps Emily too. Takes the stress off of her a lot because she's not picking; it's them, and it's all chance. The moral dilemma of what I chose for this person to die is removed to where it was just chance, and I guess for some reason for some extent, it would take some of the sting off. But we talked about this beforehand. There's a couple other options that could have been made that they were never addressed until Emily comes up with that we discussed where probably the better thing would be to do is not to choose, but that didn't come up to her point.
Yeah, she hasn't figured that out or made that option presented to her yet. That actually happens next because after the rock paper scissors battle, Ryan loses, and of course Ryan signs to Sarah and says, tells her like, yeah, I'll make sure that I'll let your daughter know that you're sorry and whatnot. And then of course Ryan gets crushed, and now it's 5 yellow, 3 red, and another candy bar is slid into Emily's room, and this time it says contains no peanuts, and she just drop kicks the bar against the door.
Right.
And then everything goes back to concrete, then quickly goes back to transparent. And in room number 3, where Ryan once was, is Emily's husband, David.
Yep.
And I mean, it's definitely more twisted right now. And of course, Sarah completely realizes, she's like, oh, I'm done. But she doesn't say anything. She's she basically just pipes up and says, look, I know what is going to happen. You have your mom here, and now I guess this man is your husband. You're obviously just going to pick me. And she's like, so just get on with it. And David, of course, is confused. He's in the catch-up mode right now. And Sarah just politely says she has to pick who lives and who dies. She's got 3 more picks before she's done. And yeah, like David's shocked that she's been doing this 5 times, and he thinks this is like he's showing a lot of humanity here. And of course, Sarah's asking Emily like what she's waiting for, and Emily looks at her and mouths the words that I'm sorry. And Sarah says, okay, though this is what Brian told me before he left. He told me that when I get out, I should find his daughter and apologize to her. He didn't say what for, but his name is Ryan Littleton, and he's from Winthrop in Washington, and that's what she communicates before she is crushed. Oh no, she says one last thing. She says also, tell my kids that I love them and that I'm okay. You'll do that. And then Sarah tells everybody, turn around, you don't need to see this. And then and then Sarah is gone. And now we're down to 2. And Emily is just very defeated at this point. And she's listening and she hears quiet footsteps and they're growing louder, and she's trying to like look under the door and she's trying to scream and get the attention, but of course no voice is coming out. But she does manage to squeeze her hand underneath, and then a finger touches her palm and begins to gently rub it. And I didn't get what was going on here. Do you have an
I didn't
interpretation of
either.
this?
No, that was really weird. There was no relevance to the story whatsoever, other than that someone was paying attention to her. But it
It
no,
just
I
felt
didn't get.
odd, right? Yeah. Okay. So it
Yeah,
wasn't just me. Um,
but again, like I said, there was so many things that had thrown me out of the story at this point. I was reading it to understand the story, but there was the connection was gone. I was now analyzing more than I was actually trying to enjoy. I when that came up, I thought just filler. There's no reason for it. So
mhm.
yeah, it threw me off
Yeah,
even more.
it felt like an unnecessary distraction because then of course when the walls kind of come back up again, David and Ruby are there, and then we hear the word mummy, and
Yep.
Emily turns around and there's her 5-year-old son Benny, and of course she's trying to scream and can't, and David the dad is going into dad mode. He's like, "Hey, are you okay? Are you
Oh
sure?
yeah.
Okay, calm down, sit over there. We're gonna play a game." And of course the ceiling starts to descend as the numbers pop up, because now Emily has to choose between her son, her husband, and her mother. And her mother,
This is the first time the other choice actually came into her head. She decided she didn't want to play.
yeah, this is where she's like, she doesn't want to play, she doesn't want to do anything. And of course Ruby is telling her, listen, there's a reason why I invited you over today. I was going to tell you that, the cancer has returned. I've got 6 months. You need your husband, you need your son. I'm not going to be around. Do let me do this for you.
Right,
And
right.
Emily is like shaking her head no, and how she's like she doesn't want to make the choice anymore. The ceiling keeps descending, and it gets 10 feet, then 8 feet, and even David is like, "This is not good. Like this is not good." He doesn't want to lose Ruby either. Um, and so she goes to her son, who's on the opposite side of the glass, and they're mirroring each other, holding the hands up, and Ruby is just constantly just telling Emily, it has to be me. It's clear. And of course, David's like, Emily will never do that, and Ruby's just making the argument like, listen, this is what's happening with me. Let me go out this way as opposed to slow death with cancer. And
Well, yeah, and Emily at first thought she was lying just to get her to ease her conscience about it. She
right
didn't believe her at first.
until Ruby says, "I swear on your father's grave," like it's
Right, right.
like it's okay. I want you to do this. It's fine. You're all right. And
You're saving me from all the pain coming up.
exactly. And of course, Emily is just she slowly makes the decision, goes on to Ruby's number. She mouths back that she loves her mom, and Ruby's like, "I love you," and it happens, and now we're down to 7 yellow lights, 1 red, and fortunately, David was distracting Ben, so he didn't see what happened to his grandmother. And when he asked like where'd Grandma go, David's like, "Oh, she just gone out for a bit. It's fine." And
Hmm.
then the walls go white, and then they come back up, and in Ruth's room
As
is
a baby.
is a baby asleep in the cot, and that's a choice that Emily does not know how to make, and that's where we have to cut off for spoilers here, because if you want to find out how she does this, because it's not her kid, it's not her baby, it's just a random baby, and if you want to find out what decision she makes, you'll have to read the script. But Adega, up until this point, uh, how are you finding the story thus far?
Um, well, I already told you I was taken out of the story, and I
Mm-hmm.
found parts of it quite ludicrous. But if it was done where things were consistent, uh, for whoever he whatever the end reveal is, it was consistent with the type of technology and situation, whatever needed to be changed around the whole story. Get rid of the needles, do this, that, or the other.
Hmm.
I think it could have been a lot better. I would have been, because it's very basic. It is a story set on determining what a moral compass is in a human,
Hmm.
how well they will respond under stress, what kind of actions they will take, and and to have a story that will test that is actually pretty cool. The story, like I said, it could have been, in my opinion, outstanding if there were some modifications. Get rid of underneath the door, give more uh, stressful situation and more urgency to. And the lights on the floor and on the ceiling could have been different. The consistency with there's a lot of things, but there's a lot of good things where you get to know each person under a stress just enough to where you don't have to develop the too deep, but you kind of care about their situation or about what Emily's going to pick.
Right.
So I, yeah, at this point I was let down. The first 2, 3 pages, I'm thinking, I don't watch these kind not because they're, most of the time they do kind of seem a little, yeah, that is um, a prejudice that I have against these type of things, but I was taken in and then thrown out. So at this point, it was, to me, I had the real disappointment, a lost opportunity is what I think. Maybe with some serious um, thought and consistency, it would have been a lot better. Yeah, when I got to the end of it, I thought, wow, that's a heck of a letdown.
Yeah, I would say, because we won't spoil the ending, but when we get an explanation as to why this is happening, the explanation stimulates more interesting ideas to follow up with, as opposed to just kind of
Hmm.
leaving it empty. And I think that was what hurt the script is in itself, because it turned a series of tests challenging an individual on their moral compass into like an arrogant story about
Yep,
right and wrong.
yep.
And I think that did a disservice to what was trying to be accomplished here. Now, a lot of those things could be fixed pretty simply. Um,
Hmm.
because I will say this: the pacing of each situation. I mean, it's a wash, rinse, and repeat type of situation where each new character that presents is in the same boat as the previous characters are trying to figure out, well, what's going on, what's happening here, and they only do that 3 times until they start incorporating family members. And when you have family members in here, now you have something a lot more intimate that's happening, and I think that I think the writer did that well, because there was a distance between the strangers. And then once we started crossing into, okay, these are members of your family, the choice has more weight to it. And I like that was that, because again, the introduction of Ruby, the mother, is the mid-act turning point, the point of no return now, which is that she has to make a choice regarding her parent. And we know that she's not going to choose her parent first. And then
Right.
you escalate that by bringing in her husband, and you know she's not going to choose her husband. And then you bring it in with her kid, and it's like, well, which generation is the one that's already, had an impact on lives, and what more can they really do at this point, which is dark and depressing, but it's dark and depressing because there's a truth to that. And then when she reluctantly chooses her mother, you now have you at first you think, well, okay, who else is there left to really get under Emily's skin to make her not choose to make her not to make her choose for her husband between her husband and her son, and then they bring in the most innocent thing you can imagine, which is a baby where you have no idea where it came from, who's missing it, if they even are aware that it's being missing, because maybe they're also the parents are also in those pods as well, and it raises the question from the audience to wonder, well, would she entertain the idea of sacrificing this newborn child to save her husband and son? And the only way you're going to find that out is if you read the script. But
I got a question for you.
Sure.
And it's probably pretty obvious. Because sometimes I think an author will accidentally fall into something, and I don't know if this was that case or actually he thought it out. Because if you look at the first group of people, they kept their distance. The old man sat in a corner, you know, they would, and then there was the next group, and the next group came a little closer where they're signing and talking, and then came the mother, and then the father and the son were right up against the glass with each other the whole time and thing. So it was like a setup between not just emotional ties being so distant, becoming close, but it also had this situational or the scene where the people were tying closer and closer. I like that, but I don't know if that was deliberate.
Yeah, I mean, either way, it did the thing most importantly required, which is it worked. So
right.
If it was deliberate, I would say good job, and if it was by accident, I would say make sure you
good job.
Yeah, good job, but also make sure you kind of refine it to give it a bit more of a poignant moment to it. But
right. And I think too, this story, if it was to be filmed, you'd have to have one heck of a director.
Yeah.
Because the scenes, the situation, the tension, a lot of it will be nonverbal. White sitting in there who can't. So whoever is causing this scene to be made has really got to know how situational awareness, how the music's going to set the mood, where the cameras are going to be, and what kind of performance you got to get out of this actress to be able to do that. Because it's very, very short, and if you wanted to have an hour and a half movie, it's going to take some real creativity.
Yeah. It's definitely more of a mood piece than it is a simple just point and shoot type of thing. I would say, yeah, I mean, the way I look at this is like you'd have to get someone who came from like directing, as weird as it is to say, who came from directing a movie like Cube or Saw, any one of those entries, because that's the type of mood you'd be taking to really exploit the actors being in such a contained space, such a neutral looking contained space.
Right.
So, yeah, that's going to be, that's going to take some effort, but I will say this, I can see why this script did have, 13 producers voting for it, because those 13 could probably see, yeah, this could be made on a really small budget of maybe under $5 million, probably even less. I mean, if I really wanted to do it myself, I could probably get it shot for a few $1,000s, to be honest.
Right. And here's the thing, and this is where I'm going to throw you, because I don't think you are expecting my response with this, and I'm going to jump a little bit. I actually think this movie should be made as much.
Yeah?
I'm one of the ones who would say that it should be, because I'm sure some people will get something out of it. You just have to have the right elements in it, maybe a little bit of rewrites. I would never watch it, but I think it would be something that is worthwhile to be made. All my criticisms aside, I know that sounds weird, but I'm one who would say, yeah, you can do it for cheap.
See, I don't disagree with you on that. There's talent in the writing. It's the subject matter that's a little tricky, and I would say the ending doesn't quite stick the landing, but it gets very close. So yeah, I'd be in the same boat. So are you saying, Adega, that even though it's not of your taste, the merits of the script would warrant a green light in your opinion?
Yeah, yeah, I hate it, but I think it should be made.
Cool. I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I don't hate it, but I'm thinking it falls a little bit short. But where it falls short is not deep enough for it to be critical to the script. It's not going to make it collapse in on itself. I
Right,
think
right.
the things that it does right well. I mean, the characters of Matt and Lucy and Sarah and Ryan, I'm still able to remember them, and they have such little screen time. And
Yes.
there's something very important to that. It really means that the writer put in the work to make sure that these characters stood out, even though they're only going to be in the movie for a few minutes at a time.
Hmm.
And that takes
I
some
know, I
skill.
completely agree.
So
Yep.
so yeah, I would give this a green light as well. So that would be a double green light. Um, Definitely outside of our tastes, but not outside of the merits of the execution.
Well, and I know some, and I'm sure you do too, enough writers that will think, man, you can't pass this one up.
Yeah,
You know, it's the situation, it's the tension, and it's the emotion that they're getting, not necessarily the consistency of the story. So,
exactly.
man,
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I'm checking in over on the Patreon here to see how they voted on the script, and they voted to greenlight it as well. Um,
yeah, there you go.
I think this is the, I mean, this is the type of simple film that would have a niche audience, but would definitely create a cult following because of how the third act plays out and the
Right.
information that's presented to the main character as a result of the choices that she makes. You know, with that last those last two decisions. So,
In other words, read the script.
in other words, yeah, read the script. so, so that's basically what I think we'll have to say here for that. So we've got
Yeah.
so we you know we've broken our little double pass. Well, we ended up preventing ourselves from getting into another double pass streak. So yeah, we got some more green lights going on here on the merits of the script. I think this writer Michael Jones is pretty solid. A few tweaks there, and
Yep.
this would be a script that I think would make a pretty good low budget indie film that could definitely spawn a modest franchise to the right following.
Hmm.
And I don't know if it would ever explode like a Terrifier or a John Wick type of thing, but it would definitely be a stable and reliable type of franchise of how can you play around with these types of choices? How can you really push the edge or push the envelope to this
Right.
situation? Because Cube, they made like what, 4 or 5 of those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Saw, they got over 10. So there's potential for something like this to kind of follow in those footsteps.
And the thing is it's only playing one game with the person's emotions and choices,
Mhm.
where there is an infinite number of situations that anybody put in to put heavy stress on their moral fiber. And yeah, there could be, again, considering the setting, it's hallways and rooms. There's no budget to it. You're right. It could be made 2, 3 movies out of this.
Oh
It
yeah, like
probably will get people that really follow it.
I mean, you could have a situation where the person in the middle is presented with, her boyfriend on in one room, and then she saves him. But in the person that she sacrificed earlier on, the other person that shows up is maybe the woman that her boyfriend's cheating on her with that she didn't know about it.
And that's exactly what I was kind of thinking. People will be exposed to the lies of other people and what kind of choices.
What type of choices will they make in that area?
Mm,
Or because I would
hmm.
look at it this way, where you would have the woman come in and say, "Yeah, that's my boyfriend. No, we've been together ever since." And then the guy's saying, like, "No way, I haven't seen you in years. You're just bitter." And then you have that question, like, "Well, who's telling the truth, right? Has he really been
Right.
faithful, or is this person just trying to make is just angry that she got dumped for this new girl, if that's the case, and she's just making this lie up so that she can make the guy that left her suffer. There's a lot of, you can play a lot with this. So that's why, another reason why I want to give it a green light for myself, and hopefully maybe we'll get made on a low budget, because this could be an interesting franchise for at least a few movies. I mean, there's definitely going to be a point where it runs its course and you're not going to be interested anymore. But I think try to get a few movies out of it in total would not be a bad thing for indie cinema, and for just spicing up the type of movies that we normally get on streaming and in theaters.
Right. No, I agree.
All right. So with that being said, Adega, do you have any final thoughts before we call it a night?
Not really. Just thanks again. This one was a challenge I didn't like. But in all honesty, my personal prejudices can't cloud my vision of what somebody else would appreciate, and I know somebody else would appreciate it. So no, it was a challenge for me, and I appreciate that. So yeah, that's it for me. I back to writing on my stuff.
All right. Well, speaking of which, where can our wonderful audience find some of your stuff?
I got Barnes and Noble, and I got Amazon. You either look up Adega or Adega Outlaw. It's just, those two companies don't like each other, and they don't play nice. So you have to kind of. I use the author pen name as Adega, but you have to play their game, unless you're with a regular publisher. So, and I don't want to do that anymore. And then I got my YouTube channel of the Blood Witch books. The next one it should be any day. It may even be available. My artist was putting the final touches on the history book.
Oh, nice.
So there's 3 of those. There's the main Blood Witch book, and then there's this kind of, it's not really it's huge. It's not really an epilogue, but it fits in. So I just have fun with that, stuff for my kids. I don't keep any of the money I give. So it's all good.
All right. Well, those things are in the chat, and they'll be in the description on this video on the YouTube side of things. So I want to thank you, Dave, for taking this moment this evening to hang out. It's always a pleasure. I want to thank everyone else listening live and on the replay, because it's always appreciated. And if you are interested in finding out what scripts we are going to be reviewing on the Saturday show, you can go ahead and sign up to the Patreon. We have a 1-week free trial option there, where you get access to all of my posts, my musings, my reviews, my notes, my tips, my how-tos, everything there that you need to get started if you're interested in writing. Thank you so much. Just trying to help out those in the who want to get into this area of the creative field. And in addition, every once in a while, when time allows, I'm able to pop up a review there. Usually it's either a written review, or maybe it'll be like an audio review of something, just because post the WGA strike, I've been getting a lot more attention and
there you go.
And opportunities there. And so, that of course is taking a great deal of my time, but it's all hopefully to the benefit of you guys when all of you start seeing the results of that over the next few years. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone else there for watching tonight. We will all see you right here next week, same time, same channel. And never forget, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.